Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 59. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very, very special guest out in Minnesota, Alex Zauner. Alex, what's going on?
Not much. I'm so excited for us to finally be sitting down virtually, obviously, and doing this.
Me too. You know, it's been a while. We've had to reschedule this a couple times, once on your end, once on my end, and we're finally making it happen. Before we jump in, because I know we're going to go pretty deep, let's just start surface level. And why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So like Joe said, I'm Alex Zauner. I'm from Minnesota. I am a mom to two little kids, a 2.5-year-old and an 11-month-old. And I'm married to my husband, Jordan. I am work at a local fitness boutique called Alchemy. And if you've ever heard of the book, The Alchemist, that's what the company's named after. And it's a really cool community and place that is there to challenge people in and out of the gym to just pursue their legends day in and day out. I've been with them for 6 years next month, and they and that place have really impacted me and the things that I want to do outside of my full-time job. I hit 8 years sober last week. On my real birthday is also my sober birthday. And that was super exciting to be able to just get another year of growth in terms of life and a year of growth in terms of sobriety. I'm just trying to think, like, I love spending time with my friends and family, traveling, exploring, getting to see my kids grow and like now become kind of friends because my youngest is boy Griffin. He can actually like play. And so my daughter Clara is, on some days she likes him, and on other days she's realizing now she has to share. But it's just so cool to get to see kids grow and develop and how much they like learn and change. And it also is a constant reminder for me to live a more childlike life and to be free, but it also encourages me to do the things that for a long time maybe I wasn't doing or I wasn't pursuing. And it's a constant reminder to like follow your passions, and like this is just your only one life, so why not live it?
I was speaking with Zach Donahue, who is our mutual connection, just an incredible human being. And we were having a conversation about life, and he posed the question to me, when did you stop playing in the rain? And I really had to think hard about it. And I don't know if I've come up with the exact time frame, but at some point between childhood and now, I stopped playing in the rain. Like if it was raining when I was a kid, I'd go outside, I'd get wet, I'd do whatever. And now if it's raining, you know, you put up your umbrella and you go right inside, and we lose that childish, not in a bad way, but that childish part of ourselves. And so I'm curious for
Mhm.
you what it looks like to live a childlike life.
Yeah. So it's funny, actually. Today I had a friend that shared something about how our 30s are where we have the opportunity to unlearn all the things that we learned in our teens and our 20s of how we're supposed to live
Mm.
or what we're supposed to do. And our 30s is when we start to like reconnect to that childlike version of ourselves. And it's so true. And maybe people are doing this before their 30s, but that was something that I could really relate to because that's really when I became a mom and I started to do inner childlike work. And for me, living a childlike life is just being exploratory. I don't even know if that's like the right word, but being open to explore and do things and like discover. My daughter is always just like wanting to go and like climb the rock pile or hang from the monkey bars or she is always so imaginative, right? Like last night, my husband and her came into our bedroom and she was sitting on him and he was crawling. And they were like, we're going off into the enchanted forest. And it's just this reminder to not take life so seriously and to be open to adventure and to be curious. I mean, kids are literally seeing and learning things for the first time literally. I mean, we all are learning
Mhm.
forever, but like they are just seeing things, and it'll be like each morning I'll open up the windows and she'll be like, oh, the sunrise, it's beautiful. And she just like reminds me, like, you're right, it is. And like slow down and appreciate and express gratitude for these things that sometimes that we just breeze on by.
Mm. That is really interesting thought. What is awe? When we're in awe of something, it doesn't happen too often for me as an adult, but when it does, it's usually when I'm seeing something for the first time, something that blows my mind. And if we could see the world like that every day, like a child, I mean, life would be so, so different and so, so special. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so before kids, did you feel like you lost that part of yourself?
I think, yeah, I feel for me, I didn't realize that I had lost these parts of me that I had as a kid until I actually got pregnant and I started working with a friend of mine, Nikki Norenberg, and she had me do like these exercises about who I was as a kid. And one of the exercises was to ask my family things that they loved about me as a kid. And it was cool to see the similarities, but it also made me be like, wow, there are definitely parts that they're sharing that I have definitely dulled out to try to fit in. Um, because right when we're growing up, like what do we want as kids more than to fit in? And what I've learned over the past years of like, I'm okay if I don't fit in. I'd rather be me and be my own unique self, however that shakes out. And if something somebody else is doing, or the group is doing, or the collective is doing, I no longer feel that pull. But I didn't really start to do like re looking at who I was as a kid to now until I started working with Nikki. And that was really eye opening to see the ways in which my light had dimmed because I wanted to truly fit in. Because I think we are given this idea that connection and fitting in is like kind of as a kid, it feels like that's what the end all be all is. And it wasn't until I realized, like, no, like true belonging is when we can belong to ourself and coming back to that little child before the world tells us who we're supposed to be.
Ooh, that's so good. I have a story that popped into my mind. It's first heard it from David Foster Wallace, who I'm not sure if he's still alive, but he gave this speech where he talks about these two young fish that were swimming downstream, and this older fish was swimming upstream. And as they passed, they kind of nodded at each other, and the older fish said, "Good morning, boys. How's the water?" And they kept swimming, and then the two young fish eventually turned to each other, and one of them said, "What's water?" And I
Mm,
think so often we get wrapped up in life and we live what we think we should be living, and we forget about all these possibilities around us and who we even used to be. And so that's really powerful. Um,
mm.
yeah. So let me ask you this. If you were to go back to your childhood self, what are some of the characteristics that pop up?
Yeah. So the one thing that like pretty much everyone said is I was always like the high energy one. And when I think of that, I relate to myself being like the girl that was too much. Oh my gosh, you're too much of this, too much of that, too much, too much, too much. And I think we, because of that, like cause kids to just start to like shrink inward and not fully express themselves and be high energy and tell them like be quiet, you're being too loud. And so for me it's been a lot of just like kind of owning that part of myself and being okay with being the louder high energy one, because that's what makes me who I am. And what I'm thinking of actually as we're talking about this, I saw this person on TikTok and they asked like to the kids that always got in trouble for like being too loud or talking too much during class. Like, what are you doing now? And I was like, I'm coaching and yelling at people and talking super loud and encouraging them. And yeah, that's pretty much on brand with like the things that I was told, like, tone it down, like, calm yourself. And now that's like a big part of what I get to do is encourage people and be
Mm.
loud and be too much. And it's accepted because I embrace it for the beauty that it is, that it makes me my unique self versus toning it down and like letting that too muchness be dimmed.
Mm, that's so cool. And being authentic is hard. That's really hard work. And speaking of hard things, we'll get into all of this more later. I actually want to ask you about some of the hard things that have been not in your control in life. So if you were to look back at all of your years so far here on this earth, what's the hardest thing that you've ever had to handle? So something that you didn't get to choose for yourself, but that you had to handle.
Mm, that's a hard question. Honestly, I think what comes to mind first is just, and I don't know, I chose sobriety for myself, but I didn't choose, I don't know. So like drinking, right?
Hmm.
Like for me, it impacted me in a really negative way. And if I could go back, like I wish I wouldn't have let alcohol impact me and challenge me the way that it did.
Mm,
Because although yes, I could control and could have decided to drink less or to not drink at all, once I drank, the things that I did felt out of my control. And it wasn't until the next day that I could decide to either not drink or continued on that path. And once I drank, it was really an unmanageable thing for me, not in the sense of like I was drinking every day, but once I started drinking, I started to shift away from who I really was. But I don't know. I think another hard part for me has honestly like postpartum,
mm,
living a postpartum life. I didn't think it was going to be so challenging. I obviously chose to have a child, but I didn't choose the way that I mentally was hard on myself navigating postpartum. And it was really learning how to love myself again with seeing the changes in the way my body had honestly forever changed from
mm.
having a kid. And it felt isolating and lonely. And there were a lot of things that I experienced that I honestly just didn't feel prepared for. Like I felt like, hello, there's all these people that have been moms before. Why hasn't anybody talked about
Mm.
this? And I don't know if those really answer your question. Those are just two of the challenges I feel like that I faced, that I may have gotten myself into those situations, but didn't feel like in control in them when I was in um, that experience.
That works. Let's talk about them. So the first one I can relate to in the beginning of this coming year, I'll be 10 years without alcohol. And I
Woo.
yeah, it's awesome. I mean, my life has been so amazing over these past 10 years, this past decade, and I can't imagine what it would have been like if I didn't make that choice. And so we'll talk about that, and then we'll talk about the postpartum stuff. And I cannot relate to that, but I'm very excited to learn more. So to go back to the alcohol stuff, I guess, right? Like I relate on such a deep level because I didn't drink every day. I drank in high school socially, I would consider on the weekends. That was just the culture that I grew up in. And I realized after a couple of years, I never had one beer. I've never in my life had one drink. It was either zero drinks or it was a lot of drinks. And I never really saw that as a problem until I got to college and everything was just bigger, right? There was more alcohol, there were more parties, there was more of a chance for me to lose myself in the crowd. And I noticed that was happening, and I made the decision to stop. And that decision to stop, while it was one of the best decisions I've ever made, it was also one of the hardest because I felt so alone. And
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if you felt similarly with your journey.
Yeah, so I got sober a year out of college on my 24th birthday. And it what was interesting for me is where I felt alone was just like I felt I was going to be off on this little island, not drinking when everyone else was drinking. And that was like the connector of how everyone was going to have fun and let loose and de stress. And like by me not drinking, like I would just kind of be like this outcast. And that was really fearful for me. But I think what was helpful in my sobriety was I had friends supporting me in this journey. Now, yes, they supported me and they understood my why and they didn't question it, but it was still lonely feeling like you're the outcast and you're the one that isn't drinking. And they supported me, but I feel like they didn't fully get it either because I chose to not drink because I felt like this is impacting my life in a negative way. I'm feel like I'm losing myself by drinking. And I was drinking on the weekends. I wasn't drinking daily, what I feel like most people assume have an image of somebody that decides to remove alcohol. It's like we have to have like this horrible, horrible experience to want to stop drinking. And for me, like, yeah, life kind of sucked when I drank. And that was enough for me to make a change.
Mm.
And I think what was hard and kind of isolating was people being like, well, moderate, like I guess I don't get why you're just never gonna drink.
Mm.
Like, why wouldn't you just drink a little bit? And that was hard, but I still felt the support from them. It was like people outside of that group of like, well, I've never seen you drink X, Y, and Z. And it's like, maybe you didn't. You also didn't see what it was like the next day for me, having to figure out who I had to apologize for, backtrack to my lost purse or phone. Who did I, yell at? How much money did I spend? Like all these things that nobody else has to live but you.
Mm.
And even though it felt really scary to pull myself out of what really feels like the soul connector in our society, I'm like so grateful that I did because now where I'm at, I have an even stronger community surrounding me in my sober journey.
Yeah, that's really cool that you had friends who supported you through that journey. And, I had people in my corner as well. And I think it was a little bit different because when I decided to stop drinking, it was the second semester of freshman year of college when
Mm-hmm.
that was what people did. But the one thing that I kept coming back to was just the concept of delayed gratification and having the self-awareness that I am very much an all or nothing person. You can see it in my life today with my marriage, my work, the way I exercise and embrace fitness. And those are all things I've chosen. But at the time, alcohol was fun at the time. You drink, you go out, you have fun, but then the next day and the next day doesn't feel so good. And I decided that I needed to be able to delay gratification and find other outlets for my energy and time. And I'm so happy I made it now. And I never really looked back, but I'm curious if you had any times during these past 8 years where you actually came close to saying, you know what, let me give this another shot. I'll try drinking in moderation.
Yeah. I feel like as I just had a conversation with a friend like a month ago about this. I've never like seriously considered going back and drinking, but there's definitely been honestly more recently, I hadn't ever had the thought until I got into my 30s of like, okay, things have shifted. People aren't going out to the bars and getting drunk. We're going to dinners and we're having wine and we're going to wineries or we're going to a brewery. And it was like the whole mindset with drinking was like this casual drinking, even though people are probably drinking just as much. It's like the setup of it felt different. And I started to question like, well, now I'm like older, I'm more mature. People aren't drinking to get drunk, but like, I mean, people were still getting drunk in these situations, but like these were things that I was telling myself, like, maybe it would be different. And then I like had that reality of check, like, no, like, A, it won't be different. B, it's not worth it because at the end of the day, like, I feel so freaking good in this life that like even going out and like trying to drink and not knowing like what could happen or what that outcome could be is just not worth it to me. And when I initially got sober, it was really because, like, yeah, I hated the way it made me feel. I hated blacking out. I hated letting myself down, other people down, lying, losing things, fighting with people. And that was really the catalyst. But like what keeps me sober it is those things, but also like the fact that like I do not want to have to deal with a hangover,
Mhm.
uh, the health detriments of alcohol. Yeah, no, thank you. I don't know if you listen to that Andrew, the Huberman Lab
Mhm.
podcast, but it's like now it's like the reasons that I continue to stay sober is not just my own experience, but also just the impacts alcohol can have on your life, like isn't worth it to me. And I want to show my kids and I want to show other people that like you can live a really beautiful life, and like life is going to challenge you whether you're sober or not. So why not live it sober and discover like who you are without some substance trying to like help you be this best version of you, when like I truly believe we're all our best versions without a substance
Yeah.
putting that extra layer on over us.
Except for coffee, of course, because
Yeah, coffee's necessary. Caffeine is necessary.
agreed. So to transition a little bit, tell us a little bit more about your postpartum experience, and I'd love to hear more about the concept of an identity shift because I would imagine that's a huge part of having your first child and even your second child.
Mhm. Yeah, so when I got pregnant, it was like the best thing. I was so excited. And, I continued to stay active and move my body and do all these things that made me feel really strong as my body started to change. And when we had our daughter, Clara, who's our first, she's 2.5, she came 3 weeks before COVID and everything closing. And it was this huge transition. Where I was like learning to figure out how to be a mom essentially, but like I had a C-section, so I was super sore. Breastfeeding is basically the most challenging thing in the world that people do not talk about. Um, I could like move around, but like I said, it was in pain.
Mm.
I felt very lonely. I had friends that were moms and I would talk to them, but it didn't seem like they had been through similar things that I had gone through. So it felt very isolating. I was also stuck at home because it was COVID. And in this like entirely new realm of just like trying to figure it out and not being able to like go and see people. We like our little pod was with my parents because I was like, my husband's working, I'm by myself. And for me, it was just like figuring out like, who am I? And when I went into motherhood and I was transitioning to be a mom or be pregnant and got pregnant, and I thought about this a lot before we had Clara, was I don't want to be the mom that sole identity is being a mom. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you choose for you, but that was something important to me, was I wanted being a mom to be just one of the titles that I have, but not my sole title, because I've heard stories or I know other people that feel like they looked back and they lost themselves in motherhood. And there are some people that that's what they feel is like their soul calling. And for me, I feel like being a mom is one of my callings and there's many other things. And so I made it my purpose. Like my identity is not just a mom, but like I'm Alex, I'm a mom, I'm a coach, I'm a wife, I'm a friend, I'm a podcast host, I like to adventure, I'm sober. Like those are all my identities that make me me. And in postpartum, it was hard to continue to come back to that. And I had to remind myself of like, as I started to feel stronger and feel more like myself, okay, now I can do things for me. I can go work out. I can go on walks. I can go see friends. And it was really, that's when I started to be like, okay, if I'm going to embrace like motherhood being a part of me and not just like my sole personality, I need to take care of myself. And I need to do the things that fill up my cup. And that was integrating all these different things into my life, and finding community and asking for help, because
Mm.
I felt like I was literally by myself. Even though I was talking to other people, it wasn't until I got involved in a mom group, like I think I was like 6 or 7 weeks postpartum, and we just literally talked about the things that we were navigating. And because of that, my friend and I, we actually started a company for moms to empower moms to share their challenges, because a lot of times you go on social media and it shows like all the highlights, which is wonderful, but that set me up for so many unexpected things in my like parenting and postpartum. And so that's why I think it's so important to just share like motherhood is so wonderful. but it's going to challenge you and stretch you and teach you so much about yourself. And there's a lot of reflection and introspection, but it also guides you back. I think if you can see it as this, it guides you back to like who you were as a kid, and maybe even helps you to like realize if you've lost sight of that, that you can start to access that again and be more playful and go dance in the
Mm.
rain and do these things that excite you. Like being a mom is just a part of who you are, and it can help you to really rediscover your purpose and your passions and how to really live a full and meaningful life.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And, the listenership to this podcast, I don't know, but maybe there are a handful of pregnant women out there, or moms, or expecting moms. But for anybody who is, or even for dads, right? Or for people who are going to be supporting new moms, what's some of the best advice you can give to people as they prepare for the
Mm.
baby, as they prepare for that transition?
I think if you are the parent
Mhm.
of the child that's coming, talking about, you know, your plans as you make that transition of like understanding, like, honestly, the birthing parent is pretty laid up for the first few weeks. You're not really supposed to be moving around a lot. You're really supposed to be like pretty much on your bed or on your couch. And so, like, having that real honest conversation and recognizing like many men don't get maternity leave or paternity leave like at all.
Mm.
And so having the conversation of like, what is your schedule going to look like? How are we going to navigate this together? When there's night feedings, like what does that look like? Are we going to do them together? Am I just going to get up on my own and do them? Or like for me, because we were breastfeeding and formula feeding, my husband would get up, he would like get the bottles ready, and I would do some of my stuff.
Mm.
And then like we did it together. But then I have friends that just breastfed. And so their husband would get the baby for them and change the diaper and like let the wife like be in the bed.
Mm.
And I think these seem like small things, but they can like make or break that transition. And the more you can make it feel like a parenthood
Mm.
versus just the motherhood and the mom making that transition, and like you can be there to support her in that journey and check in on her. Like Jordan would be like asking me like, how are you doing, like what do you need? And it seems small, but like motherhood and mental health is very challenging, and like postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety is like a really really prevalent thing in the US, especially cuz a lot of men don't get time off. And so being able to have really open and honest discussions with each other is so important, and if you can do it before the baby comes, but also like realizing like every baby's different, so being flexible, but like working together and knowing that you're a team, I think is like the best advice I can give somebody is like, once your birthing parent feels up to it, like go on walks together, like do the things that you've enjoyed together. Don't stop doing them because you became parents. I mean, how often do we hear people say, like, oh, you're having a baby, good luck traveling again? It's like, no, I can still travel with my kid if I want to. I can still go on hikes with the kid. Like you get to decide how you're going to limit yourself, and having those conversations ahead of time of like making sure you and your spouse feel like, yeah, we want to keep going on those trips. Or, if we want to exercise together, it might mean finding a gym that has daycare. Or we have a lot of people at Alchemy actually. One will come in the morning
Mm.
and then one comes at night. And so it's just like you are a team and you have to have conversation and making sure that like it feels like you both are being supported and heard, and realizing like when you can step back that you're both just trying to navigate parenthood together, and you want the same thing, right? You want to make your child feel loved, and there will be hard days and there will be beautiful days, but the more you can just continue to be a team, I think is huge. And if you're not the person in that relationship, bring food. Bring food to the new parents. Like because there's nothing better than being like, yes, we don't have to cook a meal, and you can just like either order it on DoorDash, or like people would bring us frozen meals and we just put it in the oven, and it is life saving, life saving.
There we go. Some nuggets of wisdom for everybody. Pregnant, not pregnant, married, single, everybody. So those were two things that um, they were circumstances that happened as a byproduct of choices. But the next question I have for you is, what is the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose? So a choice that you've made that was really, really challenging, and maybe we exclude those two things we spoke about so we can get something different in here. But
Mhm.
I'm curious.
A choice that I made on purpose. I would say a challenging choice that I made on purpose. That was the question,
Mhm.
right? Was leaving my job that was working at an orthopedic group for a physician. I worked for a sports med doctor for 4 years out of college, and I absolutely loved my job. I studied exercise science in college. Really thought that I was going to go like a down the PA or PT route, and I was a member at a gym that literally changed my life, and it was really scary to take a leap and trust. It literally kept coming up of like I was already working there part time and felt like this pull of like I'm supposed to go work at this place. Like I really feel passionate about it, and that was scary. And it also was like I had a lot of people that didn't understand it. Most of my friends are lawyers, doctors, climbing the corporate ladder, and then to be like, I'm gonna go peace out and go work for a local fitness boutique,
Mhm.
was really scary because I feel like a lot of times, if you have never been led by a passion, it's hard to understand that feeling and that instinct. Or maybe you've felt that before and you push it down. And for me to be like, this keeps coming up.
Mhm.
And at the job that I was at, I was up for a position that I really wanted as a wellness coordinator, and I ended up not getting it. And Alchemy had been hiring for full time, and I had missed the date to apply. And I remember not getting the email and being like, I'm just going to reach out. And I reached out and I was like, what are the odds I can throw my name in the hat for the full time? I know you already closed it. And they opened it back up for me. And I ended up getting the full time offer. And it was scary as hell to leave the job that I was at. For one, like it was kind of where I thought I was always going to go, was down this path of like in sports medicine, and to then like totally shift, go to a gym, let alone a startup. I started there a year after they opened. And now I can look back and be like, okay, I did it. I made it. I'm 6 years in, and it was the best thing I could have done. But like it kept coming up for me. And I think like when we're faced with those challenges of like following our instinct and our gut is so freaking scary. And there's so much fear. But what that challenge and that opportunity taught me was I knew that that was something I needed to do, even when everyone around me was basically telling me, like, I don't know, like it was a huge pay cut, and I wasn't even making that much to start. And the hours were weird. I was working weekends and early mornings and nights, and like everything about it was just like, why? But I like knew in like my heart of hearts that that was what I had to do, and like that continues to be the thing that I've learned. When I feel a pull towards something, I can ask other people. But at the end of the day, like that lesson literally taught me like no one else is going to understand my gut and my instinct other than me. And so I'm the person that like loves everyone to tell me, like, yeah, go for it, go for it. And then I do it. But I have been taught from that situation, like, there are going to be times where I will ask people and nobody will agree. And at the end of the day, I have to come back to like trusting that gut decision.
It's so important. And again, I can relate. 15 months ago, left my full-time job to do my own thing. And it's scary. There's a lot of fear involved. But I had these conversations with people who had started their own businesses. And the conversation over and over and over again was, this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And it's also the most rewarding. I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
change it for the world. Now, none of these people were parents. I would assume that description probably goes to parenthood once you're a parent for most people. But it's true. It's been true for me. And I trusted my gut. And you know what? Not everybody understands, and that's okay. Like you said, my grandfather, I love him, but he jokes that I'm retired, and I can be further from the truth. But yeah, we're in this life once, and we get opportunities to follow our passions, to explore those poles. And I think more often than not, people regret the things that they don't do versus the
Mhm.
things that they do do. And at the end of the day, most things are reversible or nothing's permanent. So, you leave, you go to that job you think you want, or you quit and you start your own thing, right? Doesn't work out. It's not the end of the world, right? You can go get another job. You can try something else. But I think too often people stay in a place where they know they're not supposed to be, only to feel regretful or resentful later on after all that time has passed and they can't get it back. Um,
Mhm. I 100% agree. I think that's been the biggest thing that I've learned is just like I feel so excited about that decision that I made. And I think now I'm at a point where I continue to get like these new gut like pulls of like when am I going to go do my own thing, or it just because you have like a gut feeling doesn't mean it's a forever feeling.
Mhm.
And like following that feeling even if it's fearful, right? Like sometimes like when you're the most scared, that means that is the exact thing that you are meant to do, and like follow
Mhm.
the fear. It's fear. I think sometimes we get like fear confused with like, oh, I fear, nope, don't go there. But it's like actually like fear can be a good thing. Fear can be a good sign. And it's learning to work with that fear and move through that fear and use it as like the gas that propels you forward.
Follow the fear. That's got to be a hashtag, maybe a
Woo.
tattoo someday. That's pretty good. I also want to ask, so at your job before you left, you were up for this position that you didn't get. Do you think if you got that position that you would have made the transition to the gym?
Mm, good question. I don't think I would have. And I think, do you know what's funny is hindsight's 2020 because I don't think I would have. And I've thought about this a lot because that position that the other employee ended up getting, that whole department is no longer. It was because it was a total experiment to open up a wellness division in an orthopedic clinic. And it didn't evolve into what they thought it could be. And it ended up totally being dissolved. And I thought about that a lot of like, wow, if I had gotten that role, who knows what would have happened? Because I really do think alchemy and me stepping into this position pushed me in a lot of different ways in my entire life to go after the things that I was afraid of, to do the things that I felt called to do. And if I would have stayed there and done this other job, I would probably be in an entirely different situation. I mean, I probably wouldn't have met you
Yeah.
because I met Zach through alchemy. I mean, my entire life has been impacted by that place because of the connections that I've been able to make. Like people that are doing my sober program, half of them are from alchemy. Like the people that I've had on my podcast have been from alchemy, or I've made connections through people from alchemy. And like it's so crazy the way that we get to meet different people through different situations. And I've thought about that before of like, wow, if I would have gotten that job, like everything would have been different about my life. And so I can be thankful for it now.
Mm.
But in that time, I saw it honestly as like a blessing of like, hey, I didn't get it, but you know what? Maybe that's what I needed to push me into this situation. And sometimes that's what we need. We need the universe being like, nah, girl, this is not for you. You got to go to alchemy. We're not giving you this job. And like, I can say that now. At that time, I honestly feel like I was bummed about not getting that role, but I think it also, like I said, it was what guided me and made me take the leap because I felt like that's what I was supposed to do, but I still was just non-committal about it till I didn't get the other role.
I posted a quote on Instagram today from Steve Maraboli, and you walked right into this one. He said, as I look back on my life, I realized that every time I thought I was being rejected from something good, I was actually being redirected to something better.
Mm-hmm. I love that. My friend Kelsey, we were talking about this. She's very insightful and she always makes me think about things differently. And when she was dating in the spring, she was talking about, I used to see when someone didn't want to date me as rejection. And now I'm realizing it's a redirection.
Mm.
And when we can start to see that in all different aspects of our life, because if we didn't get that rejection, we wouldn't have been redirected to meet somebody else, to start that different job, to take that trip, like whatever it was, like all the ways in which we like can, it's really a mindset shift, right? We can either
Mhm.
view it as like this huge negative thing, or we can step back and be like, wow, this is redirecting me into a different path that I don't know where it's going to take me yet, but like starting to embrace that.
Yeah. And the other thing I'll add is that oftentimes, and I've experienced this in my own life and I've seen it in many people, we feel stuck and so we just stay. We feel stuck and so we just don't move.
Mm,
And in my life, it's been true that action creates clarity. And you take those steps, you try those things, you meet those people, and maybe it ends up in rejection. Maybe it crashes and burns. Maybe you take a step to the right and you realize you should have taken a step to the left. But at least you had that experience. And now you have more information as to where you need to go next. And I just think that's so important is to move. And as you said, follow the fear.
And action is better than no action,
Mhm.
right? Like you can stay stuck in that paralyzed space where you are over analyzing everything. My friend Maddie says paralysis by analysis, right? Like you are just stuck there, or you can start to take action and it's not going to be perfect. And that's okay. I think honestly, we get stuck most because we wait to do things because we feel it has to be perfect before we can start. And the best advice I ever got was start before you're ready. Just do it because you're never going to fully feel ready. For my podcast, I re recorded my first episode 8 times. And if I could go back, I would have been like, do the first one because the first one was the best and the most authentic. The eighth one that is still out on into the universe now, I wish I could just like remove. Um, it sounds so scripted, and it's just like at that point I was like, okay, this is it. Lesson learned. Next time you go in and you just let it rip because we get so focused on it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect. And I'm telling you the best things that you can do is just like start before you're ready because we can see people when they're at like years into their work. We have no idea what it looked like for them before they got started. And so it's really easy to compare people like further down in their journey. But we have to remember like we're at step one. We don't
Mhm.
know where they're at. And comparison is so hard. But when we can step back and be like, we're in different parts of our journey. I don't need to compare where they're at. I'm going to start now. I'm going to start today. I'm going to start before I'm ready.
Mm. Episode 41 of this podcast, I had on Jerry Ike, and Jerry talked about ready, fire, aim. And just that concept of take action before you're ready, take action before you know where you're going, and you'll figure it out along the way. And we often see people where maybe we want to be, and we imagine that they got there in a straight line, but really it's a zigzag. It's a
Mm-hmm.
up, down, twist, turn, left, right, and it's confusing and messy and beautiful. And the imperfections are part of the process. And the hilarious part about what you just said is I can rewind a year ago. So, summer of 2021, I remember this so vividly. The company that I do some work with, Bear Performance Nutrition, was up in Philadelphia filming a mini documentary with me. And we shot in the morning. We had some scenes to do in the evening. And I had the whole middle of the day to record my first ever podcast episode for this podcast. And I was sitting at my desk. This is, mind you, the middle of the summer. It's really hot. I'm under a blanket for audio quality. I've got like a blanket draped over my head, real close to the mic. I must have recorded it 9 or 10 times, just like you. And I was just sweating bullets, so frustrated, just upset with myself for not being able to quote, get it right. And finally, I just put something out, but I really wish that I just put out the first one because those
Mm-hmm.
imperfections are beautiful.
Right. I think that's, we all crave like just seeing people as they are. And when we can show up in like the imperfect way, it reminds us like we're all human
Mm.
because we're not perfect. Everyone has things about them that they're figuring out. And if you put something out and it isn't perfect, I think it allows us to see like there's this human side to everybody.
Yeah, it's relatable, and being relatable is really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So I love that. Now, this podcast is called the Project Endure Podcast, and I'm curious what the word endurance means to you.
Mm-hmm. Endurance to me means to sustain and like maintain like an energy, like an
Mm.
energy field. Like endurance means like you are somebody that is maintaining like a drive and a force and an energy that allows you to just keep going. Like when I think about people that do like endurance events and things, they are just like this energy and this force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, there's a Winston Churchill quote where he said, "Success is walking from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." Just being able to maintain that energy is a really cool way to look at it. And I'd imagine all the things that you do in your life, whether it's work related, being a parent, sobriety, those all require endurance to maintain that posture and that energy and that drive despite obstacles and setbacks and resistance.
100%. And that's like a really cool way to think about it because sometimes I feel like when we're just like living life, we're like, okay, I got to get up, I got to have coffee, I got to go. But if I can like step back and be like, okay, like we train for athletic events, right? Like,
Mhm.
but if we can start to see like life as its own event and its own entity, and like we're training to have the endurance to
Mhm.
sustain the energy and the presence that I want to give off, like that I think also is an important thing because nothing is worse than all of a sudden being at the end of the week and your tank's on E. So the more that we can start to find like that opportunity to maintain our energy and
Mm.
like sustain the endurance that we need in life, I feel like it feels so much better getting to the end of the week than being a literally just like, oh my gosh, I have nothing left to give.
I grew up as a child eating a lot of pizza on Fridays. It was just kind of what we did. And I never understood. And then I delivered pizza in college, and Friday was by far the busiest day, Friday evening. And I never understood it, why Friday was such a big pizza day. And then my first week ever of full-time work, meal prepped, ate food all week, and then Friday came around and I was exhausted and I just ordered pizza and I was like, I get it. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yep.
No, but that's really cool. And I think a lot of times people view endurance as always moving forward. And I don't disagree with that, but I also think there's room for rest in there. And there's room for self-care and self-love and giving ourselves grace when we fall short or fall down. And I'm curious for you what it looks like to take care of yourself enough so that you can sustain the energy moving forward.
Mm-hmm. I agree exactly with what you're saying. Like, I think for you to be able to have endurance, rest, and recovery is an important part of that because if you are constantly go, 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 it's only going to catch up with you later. And it's going to be more detrimental in the end than if you can find what works for you to sustain that energy.
Mhm.
And for me, that looks like taking walks in the middle of the day. So I'll look at my calendar and I do calendar blocking for the week of like, okay, here's when I'm coaching, here's when I'm driving. Like I put that on because it's a 40-minute drive.
Mhm.
So that's a good hour and a half of my day. Here's when I'm going to do my walk. Here's when I'm going to do my journaling. And journaling for me allows me to reset. Like I do page pulling. So, like, I've got them here. I have like 5 books that I just randomly like close my eyes and open them up to and journal whatever comes up. And some days I get to it and some days I don't. And I used to be really hard on myself about that. And I've learned to just like some days it happens and some days it doesn't. If I can get outside and go on a walk every day, I feel literally night and day difference in my energy and my presence. Just like getting outdoors is so refreshing and re energizing movement, which has looked different in all seasons of my life. Right now, it's like if I can get into the gym 3 to 4 times a week, like I'm feeling good about it.
Mhm.
I definitely like used to be a 6 to 7 times a week kind of person. And I'm learning to love myself through this season of finding the movement when I can. Um, my friends and I actually recently started, I asked them to do a 10 mile with me on my birthday last week. And we started running together on Fridays. And it was like the best because I don't usually run with people. And so we would run together and we would talk. And I think it's for me, quality time with people means a lot. So if I can meet up with you and have coffee, like that re energizes me, like being around other people and just getting to catch up, but also just like doing nothing. Like at the end of the day, after we put our kids down, my husband and I will sit out on our porch and We'll talk for a little bit. Sometimes neither of us will have the energy to talk because I'm talking constantly all day. He's in sales, so
Mhm.
he's talking all day. And we'll put on our show and we'll just relax together with our dog Schmidt. And I don't know, it looks different all the time, but I think like the consistent thing for me is trying to find some form of movement. If it's a walk, if it is going to alchemy, if it's a run, even though that seems counterintuitive for a chance to re-energize, it allows me mentally to re-energize.
Yeah, I can relate to all of that. And one thing I was thinking about yesterday, so my weekdays all look different, but there are certain days of the week that are just busier than others. And yesterday was a 12-hour day with a mix of online clients, podcast, writing, in-person clients. And I realized that I was so tired throughout most of the day. And I got to this point in the afternoon where I had an in-person client who I know just has amazing energy. And simply by being around that person, I left that session of work where I expended energy feeling like I had more energy than before I came in. And it's so powerful to be around people like that and just to be around people in general. So I agree.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We were talking about that in our sober group actually recently about be aware of how you leave certain relationships and engagements of like, are you feeling totally like depleted or are you feeling re-energized and reinvigorated, and like know that that is probably telling you something about that relationship.
Yeah, yeah, it's really important to be aware of the people that we're spending time with. And at the end of the day, our time is so precious because we don't get it back. And to spend time with someone is a privilege both ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important to be aware of how we're impacting other people as well. And I feel like there's a sense of responsibility sometimes when I am showing up for work, especially, but just in any scenario, to leave people better than I found them. And I think that requires a lot of energy. And I'm working toward doing that without depleting myself. And that's a tall order.
It, I mean, I 100% get that of just, yeah, you want to impact people and leave them the way that we were just talking about. You want them to leave being like, wow, hanging out with Joe, I feel like energized and like I could go climb a mountain, or I feel really grounded, or I feel confident. Like you want to leave people, you want to have people like leave your interaction feeling good about themselves, but it's also being aware of like how much am I expending and trying to find like that equilibrium.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. And I don't know if anybody ever finds that balance and that's the balance. That's it for life because I think that always changes and it always looks different. But to transition a little bit toward the most important question, in my opinion, of this podcast and the final question, people listening to this are in all different places of life. Somebody might be about to give birth to their first child. Somebody might be about to leave a job and it feels really scary. Somebody else might be pursuing something like sobriety, and they feel alone. So, if you were to speak to somebody on the other end of this podcast, their headphones are in their ears and it's just you and them for the next couple
Mm-hmm.
minutes, and they are afraid, they are unsure of what to do next, they just feel stuck. What would you say to them?
I would say you are never going to know what your future holds until you take that leap, until you step fully into whatever it is you're feeling called to do. And that pull that you have within you, it can feel scary, it's unknown, it's new, but I can guarantee you that if you don't follow it, there's always going to be this pull in the back of your head. And so it might seem like you're going against the grain or you're doing something that doesn't make sense to other people, but this is your one and precious life. It's nobody else's. And so you need to do the things that feel true to you, good to you, that excite you, maybe even confuse you a little bit, but follow that feeling and know that, like we talked about earlier, fear is not a sign to not pursue something. Like, follow that fear and trust that, like, even if it doesn't work out how you think it's going to, you are going to learn more about yourself along the way, right? If we stay in our comfort zone forever, no change really happens. It's when we step out and we try those different things that we actually expand, we actually grow, and we learn so much about ourselves. The things that I've learned about me over the past few years are in the things that were out of that comfort zone. And that's where the most of my growth happened, was in those situations that challenged me the most, that scared me the most. And it was in those moments that I saw how capable I am. And by doing more of those things, you're going to continue to feel more and more confident in the things that you are capable of in this life. And I want you to be able to look back on your life and see that you tried, you went for it, you did the thing, you encouraged yourself, you went against the grain. And no matter what, you were able to just say, like, I tried, even if it didn't work out the way that you thought it would.
Mm. I've shared this quote before on the podcast, but we've got some new listeners. So I'm going to share it again because it's that good, but I'm not going to say who it's by until the end. And the quote goes like this: My mother said to me, if you are a soldier, you will become a general. If you are a monk, you will become the Pope. Instead, I was a painter and became Picasso, Pablo Picasso. And we all have this unique gift and greatness inside of us. And to be anything less than our authentic self and to not explore that, that's to waste the gift. And you said it
Mm-hmm.
so beautifully. And I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah, I love that quote. And I mean, it really is such a great reminder of the fact that we all were designed to be unique,
Mhm.
but we are constantly being told how to fit in, how to look a certain way, how to dress a certain way, the jobs that we're supposed to want to do, all these shoulds of life. And so when we start to step back and feel like, you know what, I don't want to wear that. I don't want to do that. I don't want that job. We start to question ourselves when actually that's your uniqueness really begging you to let it shine and to like express yourself. And that is scary, that like we are literally trying to fit into this little box. Like, get out of the box, go do the things that you're like, I don't know, like nobody I know has done this job before. That's okay. Like, we're not meant to all want and do all of these same things. So, like, really see the beauty in your uniqueness, because I don't know, I get really fired up about that stuff because I've like started to realize more and more how we are literally like, I mean, I scroll social media and it's like, here's the styles, here's the trends,
Mhm.
and it's like, well, wait, do I want to go with the trends? Is that actually my style? Is that something that I like? And that's just like a simple way of thinking about it. But like, truly, like, do the thing within yourself. Like, don't look outward, look inward as you navigate through your journey of life.
Yeah, I agree. And Alex, if people want more of your energy, because this conversation has left me better off than I found it, where should they go to find you?
Come and chat with me on Instagram. I would love to talk with you about, hopefully you learned something or were impacted in some way. It's just Alexandra Zauner on Instagram. I have a podcast called Creating Ripples, and that's what I hope I did today, was create a ripple of impact into your life so that you can create ripples out into the world around you. And you can check out my podcast wherever you listen to podcasts.
I have no doubt you created ripples. And hey, if you're going to listen to Alex's podcast, you might as well dive in from the very beginning and listen to her eighth recording of the first episode. I'm about to do that now. And Alex, I'm just so grateful for you sharing your story and for everything that you're doing in this world. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy we're able to do this. And every time that I have had the opportunity to chat with you, I'm just like, you are so inspiring and wise and grounded. And you have this like really, your energy is like so calming. I don't even know. Like, I feel like I get so hyped up and like sweaty when I do podcasts, but like, I'm like excited and grounded and calm from your energy through the screen right now. And it feels good. And I'm leaving feeling like very excited and hyped up.
Means the world to me. And just for reference, I'm sweating over here too. So yeah, that's two.
Perfect.
All right. Thanks again, Alex.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.